Welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon session of Tech UK's Future Summit, where we're focusing on how we build the future we need, a future that works for people, society, economy, and planet. I had a fascinating session this morning, focusing on the role that technology can play in relation to people's lives, individual lives, and we now move on to thinking more broadly about some of the societal impacts and some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead when we think about society, we think about communities, and we think about places. And so we will be, through the rest of the afternoon, we'll be talking more broadly about some of the experience around kind of local authorities and local governments and local communities, before we also go on to discuss some of the challenges around disinformation and misinformation, and also how we create safer spaces in the offline world as well. But before we do that, I'm delighted that we've been joined by Baroness Barran, who is Under Secretary of State in DCMS and Minister for Civil Society, and who is going to join us to share some of her thoughts and her perspectives to kick off the discussion this afternoon. So Baroness Barran, many thanks and welcome, and please take it from there.
It's lovely to join you. I'm sorry I can't see you all, and like everyone, I'm sorry we're not together in person, but it's great to be with you. I just want to check you can hear me okay, and that all that practical stuff. I'm not on mute, so it's yes, a miracle. Yeah. Good. Okay. So you invited me to talk a little bit about your society theme, and I suppose I just thought I might start, if I may, with just a few, I guess, quite my sort of personal reflections on what we've all been through over the last year. And you know, at the risk of stating the glaringly obvious, it's been the most disruptive thing I think that any of us can remember. But I think there are sort of three things for me that have been emphasized during the pandemic. The first is just the importance of feeling connected to one's community, whatever we define as community, but that sense of loss of connection, I think we felt very acutely. One of my responsibilities is around loneliness, and my inbox on loneliness is about 5 times larger than any other bit of my inbox. So connection, I think, is number one. I think the other thing that's very sort of fundamental is just feeling like we have some sense of control over our lives. And, you know, many of us on this call are, you know, in employment. We have obviously our own worries, but we don't have some worries that others might have who are less fortunate. But even for us, I think we felt moments where you sort of think, how long is this going on for? And just not having that sort of human sense of control. And then the last thing, which I hope is kind of reasonable to say, is I think that it sounds a bit pompous perhaps to say we've understood the value of service, but if you look at the number of people volunteering, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but I think most of us who feel like we've come through this in reasonable shape feel like we're contributing to the solution. I think people want, at a human level, to be part of a solution rather than part of a problem. So I suppose I just hold on to those three thoughts really about connection, control, and service as the sort of fundamental kind of human drivers that we need to think about when we make policy in the businesses that you all run and in the communities in which we all live. So I'll just spend a minute talking about kind of what we've done as a government, particularly on trying to support that human connection side of things. So we announced, in fact, it was about the 1st specific package that we announced in April, sector specific package, was £750 million for the voluntary sector, so for charities and social enterprises. Much of that was directed to small local charities. We work closely with the National Lottery Community Fund and distributed to local charities, focusing on some of the real practical essentials like food banks, but also a big emphasis on things like mental health, loneliness, and also probably the single biggest area was services for young people and support for young people who we know really have had their lives turned upside down. And as part of that funding, we did some match funding with various philanthropists and foundations, including among them David Goldberg and his team at Founders Pledge. So some of the tech founders were involved in that funding package, and we were very excited to be able to support the projects that they felt were most deserving in this space. And I'm so firmly in the grandmother and eggs category when I remind you that digital has been really important in all of this, but it really has been important. And, you know, charities like the rest of us have done a great job in pivoting to a more digital delivery model. It has exposed where some of them perhaps have not had the skills or the resources or a combination of the two historically. So for some, it's been quite a challenge. But, you know, everything from dancing to parenting classes to book groups to all sorts of things that hold communities together, and mental health support, things that I think we were quite wary about how easy it would be and how much people would engage online. I think that's, you know, in the round been very positive. And I suppose one of the areas that's important as we look forward is, I guess we're all assuming we will be in some kind of hybrid or blended model once we're all allowed to meet up again. But there will continue to be digital delivery. And certainly I've talked to organizations who've said, you know, because they can include people from all around the country, they've had to expand provision where doing local face-to-face work has not been the case. I was talking to someone who does training for families who take in foster children, and they'd really struggled because as a foster parent, it's pretty full on to get them to turn up for a day or half a day. But being able to do shorter sessions online has meant they've been able to support that community much more effectively. And you will all have a million examples of your own about what that looks like in practice. So that's the sort of connection bit from the sort of fabric of smaller charities in particular, and how we've tried to support that. In terms of that sort of idea of we all need a sense of control, some small sense of control in my case, over our lives, and that sense of being part of the solution. We've seen really dramatic shifts in volunteering, particularly informal volunteering, which has risen from about 28% of the population to almost half. And, you know, that is all of the little local WhatsApp, and I don't mean little and local in a derogatory sense, that is a big compliment. Agile, speedy, based in their community groups on WhatsApp, on Facebook, about almost 4,500 founded since the start of the pandemic. I mean, if you do the roughest of rough backs of an envelope, if you had 100 people in each group, that's close to 500,000 people. So it's, you know, it's a pretty phenomenal effort that has been enabled, obviously, through technology. But also we've seen, you know, lots of initiatives from the sector. I mean, just to name one, we've seen Mark Sloan's COVID help desk, supporting, giving free advice and support to charities who are looking to use technology more in the delivery of their services, with over 1,500 people volunteering. So that's all been pretty positive. So I guess the question then is, as we look forward, how do we channel this stuff in a kind of organized way? And there are bits that we as government, it's our responsibility to do, and there are bits where we clearly all benefit, I hope, from working in partnership. And as a government, a key reason we were elected was to try and reduce some of the inequalities in the country, the so-called levelling up agenda. And within my department, we touch that in a number of different ways. I've talked quite a lot about the kind of charitable and social enterprise end of things, but obviously we're making massive investments in terms of gigabit capable networks, increasing digital skills, and very much leaning into the whole startup economy and encouraging and supporting tech startups and their growth. So we're focused on that all across the country, particularly now as so many people are working at home in rural communities as well as centre of town, although I know from personal experience being in the centre of London does not mean you necessarily get the fastest broadband in the nation, but we're working on it. But the other point is, obviously we have been incredibly aware of the importance of digital inclusion and skills. And I think this is where more collaboration is the only way we're going to crack this. As you will understand better than I, there isn't a single silver bullet as we understand it in terms of addressing this. We've launched local digital skills partnerships in 7 regions, which we hope are going to try and pull together some of those relationships and help address the gaps in provision. And we've also got a digital workforce fund, which is trying to help people transition from lower skill jobs into higher skill jobs, with technology obviously as a key part of that. So, from where we sit in DCMS, technology in all its different guises runs through everything we do, from the arts to sport to tourism, but obviously crucially in the digital bit in the name of the department. We're super grateful to all of you for what you're doing, and would love you to feel that you've got an open door to us. I hope you feel that anyway, but if I can just reinforce that, and that as we move out of this, your ideas on how we build on those partnerships, your ideas on how we level up and emerge from the last year stronger and fairer and more connected, are really gratefully received. So thanks so much.
Minister, thank you so much for joining us today. Through the course of conversations that we've been having, one of the questions we've been putting to speakers has been that if there was one thing that you would most like to see us all learn from through the course of the pandemic, and for us to focus on, what would it be? What's the one thing that you would really like us to reflect on and maybe think about how we can carry forward?
So going back to my 3 things, I think the thing which I think applies at a sort of individual personal level, at a business and professional level, and at a community level, is just something about reaching out and connecting with people, particularly those who aren't, who don't look exactly and sound exactly like us. Because I think there is a real risk with everything that we see about the divisiveness of different, news feeds, the different experience and perceptions of experience of different communities through COVID, that if you don't ever connect as a human being with somebody who's just a bit different, find out what you share, there is a risk that those things become sort of built in. And I think it's also important from a professional sense, because the kind of brutal reality, as we know, is that one's network is so fantastically important in terms of, setting up a business. I set up a business 100 years ago and a charity. You do it because you've got people around you who give you confidence to do it. They introduce you to somebody who did it before you, all of that stuff. So I think we need to open up and reach out and connect, as I say, just on a one-to-one basis, but also then try and weave that into our businesses so that we build a society where people feel they've got opportunity. I listened to the guy who runs the Ford Foundation, whose first name is Darren, and unhelpfully his second name has just gone out of my head, but it's really worth listening to. He did a TED interview and he talked about the fact that he grew up in Louisiana as a very poor Black kid in the bottom 0 point whatever socioeconomic in society. And he said, as he grew up, he felt his country was cheering him on. And I just think that's the most powerful image. I just think if we could make sure that our young people feel their country is cheering them on and giving them opportunities and giving them a break and allowing them to make a mistake like we all did, I think that would be a fab outcome.
Baroness Barran, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Have a good afternoon.
You've really set the tone perfectly, I think, for the discussion this afternoon, which is very much about society and about the role of technology and how we bring the two together and bring people together, and reflect on how much we can learn and build on from our experience, but also reflect on the real challenges that we see ahead. So thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Lovely.
Great introduction.
Thanks a lot.